Welcome back to the show. We are talking about China's two sessions, the major gathering of the country's top political leadership and lawmakers about to get underway in Beijing. Welcome back to our panel. I'm going to go to Zou Yue, who of course needs no introduction, as one of our main anchors on CGTN. Let's talk about the economy, because there is this big shift underway, as everyone knows who watches China, from breakneck economic growth to more quality when it comes to economic growth. How is that going to be reflected in the two sessions coming up? What decisions need to be made to keep that on track?
As Liu He, one of the top economic aide to President Xi, said at Davos, China is undergoing a transition from fast growth to quality growth. So as a result, China will change many of its priorities in terms of economic work. First of all, he admitted that China is the biggest beneficiary of the globalization and international trade system. But China is not the only beneficiary. The world consumers also benefit from cheap goods from China. But now it's time to give back. And China has been trying to play a big connector with this Belt and Road Initiative, helping facilitate trade and building infrastructures. And on the other hand, China has another big thing that is the biggest market in the world. I think this time when Liu He is in Washington, he will be talking to the United States officials about opening wider of China's market to the outside world. Those areas that were usually closed to outside investors will probably be opened incrementally. Those areas of energy, infrastructure, telecommunications, finance, services, media, and entertainment. And these things should have big chances for both international investors and the Chinese consumers. That will be a big change for the whole world.
Fred Teng, do you want to just pick up on what was just said in terms of the Belt and Road Initiative? Because this is a centerpiece of sort of Xi Jinping thought as well, that this will provide not just obviously for Chinese development, but also development of the region, and sort of bolster the Chinese dream beyond its borders.
Well, I think that you're right in terms of it's for the region, and not only the region, but some of the more poorer developing countries of the near neighboring region. And when they would bring that up, that will help not only just China, but as well as Europe as well. In terms of that, it's an ambitious plan. It's multiple year, and you know, I think that it will be successful, but it will take some time in order for that whole thing to carry out.
Dan McClory in California, just before I get to you, I want to play you Xi Jinping's a message on trade at the 19th Party Congress and see your reaction as an American to this.
We will expand foreign trade, develop new models and new forms of trade, and turn China into a trade of quality. We will adopt policies to promote high-standard liberalization and facilitation of trade and investment. We will implement the system of pre-establishment national treatment, plus an active list across the board, significantly ease market access, further open the service sector, and protect the legitimate rights and interests of foreign investors.
I mean, that must sound like music to the ears of foreign investors. It's certainly what the Trump administration had wanted. Is that going to happen, Dan, in the short term, like many U.S. businesses want, or does this have time to play out, considering the imbalances in the Chinese economy as well?
It certainly has time to play out, and especially with the extension of the Xi presidency, it will have even more time. So let's not get too caught up in the reactionary nature of the tariffs that were just recently announced. I think clearer heads will prevail. And I think what you're going to see is that while there may be some temporary interruption to perhaps market access, maybe for American companies, overall the trend is going to be China wants to attract businesses that are supportive of major policy goals. So shifting from a manufacturing economy to a consumption economy. Right. Shifting from fixed investment to economies that create services, for example. And China's made tremendous strides in movement in both of those areas. So despite the trade skirmishes, I won't yet call them trade war, that may be in the wings with the U.S., China is going to stick to its priorities, and the degree to which opening up markets can help facilitate some of those changes, and what we heard earlier, which is, you know, going from unbridled growth to quality growth, there will be government support.
So this is also a time when obviously the infrastructure of actually personnel changes a little bit as well. And we're going to see a lot of that in the two sessions, aren't we, in terms of the economy. There's lots of proposals there for sort of merging certain areas of the economy, more oversight when it comes to financial regulation. Do you think that will help provide transparency to the wider world?
It will provide transparency to the wider world, but it is more about kind of restructuring the personnel out there and having new hands out there. This is also, I would say, linked in a larger sense also to the anti-corruption campaign, etc.
I was going to get to that next. Carry on.
Where we have a kind of a renewal in terms of personnel in posts, so that, I mean, people are not just stuck at particular posts, and there's the chances of vested interests also creeping in out there. So from that perspective, I think it's important that, of course, we have a President Xi at the peak of his power, having his political appointees effectively taking the reins of the economy. But it's also useful to put this in a broader perspective. You know, when Deng Xiaoping and we had the 1978 economic reform and opening
40 years ago, yeah.
40 years ago, it was not just about economic reform and opening up. New rules of the game of the political game were also beginning to be imposed and implemented. And again, what we are going to see now is we're going to have a new phase of opening up, but we are already seeing new rules for the political game in town in China, which we will gradually get to understand over the years.
So, Zou Yue, what should we look for in terms of new positions, new personnel, when it comes to the economy and elsewhere in the two sessions?
Well, there are several things to talk about. First, of course, SOE reform. There have been talks about how to reshuffle China's state-owned economic sector. But there is always political oppositions within the system. But now I think Mr. Xi has enough political capital and will to push through the reform of the state-owned enterprises, including the ownership changes, including giving the market more say in the running management of those enterprises. And the second is, of course, the upgrading of China's economy towards consumption-driven and innovative economy. And with the government reshuffled this time, probably this is the biggest ever government overhaul of all time. Then they will have better opportunities and wherewithals to put through the reforms in that area.
So yeah, I want to ask, switch gears now and move to corruption, because if you ask any Chinese person on the street, as you know, what's the most popular policy of the Xi Jinping era so far, they all immediately say the drive against corruption. And that seems to be moving forward at this two sessions as well. We're going to be seeing more supervisory committees at the state and local level to root out not just party corruption, but also corruption in other areas as well. This still continues to be very popular, and how is it going to be implemented, and how do we measure success here, Zou Yue?
Well, there's obviously no letting up of the anti-graft campaign. On the contrary, they will institutionalize the anti-graft campaign. That will mean that it will set up a separate government branch, what we call National Supervisory Commission. That is on the same level of the state government and of the prosecutor's office. It is an independent investigation branch on corruption, and it covers all levels of the government, not only just the CPC officials, but all public servants. But how it will work remains to be seen, because it has been tested out at provincial levels. This time around, at the NPC session, it is proposed it will have a national level organ. How it's going to work, what is the relationship between this and the Central Disciplinary Commission of the CPC remains to be seen.
Fred, what are you looking for in terms of the continued wage war on graft?
I think it's a very important component of it. When we're looking at a lot of the domestic issues, whether it's water safety or whether it's food, or whether it's pollution or transparency or regulatory or including some of the financial debts, corruption plays a big part of it. And I think as China go more on in terms of their financial transactions go electronic, that in itself will also do away with a lot of the corruptions. And I think that's something the people are looking for. Just like the previous speaker was talking about, this is very, very popular with the people.
Yeah, we're going to keep an eye on that, especially. Fred Teng, thank you so much from Beijing. I wish we could have more time. Zou Yue as well, also our Chinese colleague. Dan in California, Suraj here in the studio. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Nathan King in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for watching. See you again.